Good afternoon, almost evening, now that we're all high on sugar. I hope you got your cookie and you're all full of energy now for this event that we have coming up here. Welcome. I am Judith Kelly, the Dean of the Sanford School of Public Policy, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Terry Sanford Distinguished Lecture, which is one of the highlights of our 50th anniversary as a public policy program here at Duke. And it's because of the vision of the former president, Terry Sanford, that we have a School of Public Policy today, and we're celebrating this milestone this year. Today's Sanford lecture is a conversation with two of NPR's founding mothers, Susan Stamberg and Linda Wertheimer. As you all know, NPR recently also had its 50th anniversary, which is what really gave us the idea to bring us all together for this event. So our speakers are all award-winning journalists, so I'm going to introduce them to you briefly. I'm sure you showed up today because you know just how amazing they are. Starting first with Susan Stamberg. She's a nationally renowned broadcast journalist, and she's a special correspondent for NPR. She was the first woman to anchor a national nightly news program, and she's won every major award in broadcasting. She's been inducted into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame and the Radio Hall of Fame. An NPR founding mother, Stamberg has been on staff since the network began in 1971. Beginning in 1972, Stamberg served as co-host of NPR's award-winning news magazine, All Things Considered, for 14 years. She then hosted the Weekend Edition Sunday, and now reports on cultural issues for Morning Edition and Weekend Edition Saturday. Linda Wertheimer is NPR's senior national correspondent. Throughout her NPR career, she provided clear-eyed analysis and thoughtful reporting on all NPR news programs. She joined NPR at the network's inception and served as All Things Considered's first director, starting in its debut on May 3rd, 1971. In the more than 40 years since, almost 50 years, she has served NPR in a variety of roles, including reporter and host. In 1976, Wertheimer became the first woman to anchor network coverage of a presidential nomination convention and of election night. Over her career at NPR, she's anchored 10 presidential nomination conventions and 12 election nights. Thank you, Linda and Susan, for your commitment to the future of journalism and to our students, and thank you for your time. If you're here in person or online, and we have many, many people with us online, we are thrilled that you're here for this special event. Today's talk is going to be held in person with our own Frank Bruni, who joined Sanford as the Eugene Patterson Professor of the Practice of Journalism and Public Policy just last year, after 25 years at the New York Times. After we hired him, I got hate mail from all over the country saying, "How dare you, because you can't take my columnist away." So I'm very, very happy that he's still writing a newsletter that's taken some pressure off of me, because people want to keep hearing from Frank, and they want to keep hearing about his dog and all sorts of other things. So we're really pleased to have Frank with us. Frank has just written a new book, which is a beautiful book called The Beauty of Dusk, which I highly recommend to you. I want to thank our co-sponsors of tonight's talk, the DeWitt Wallace Center for Media and Democracy, which is based at Sanford, and WUNC, North Carolina's public radio station. Coming up, we are thrilled to announce that next week we have the Spring Rubenstein Lecture on April 14th, and it's going to be right here again in Page Auditorium, and it's going to feature Duke alumni friends Judy Woodruff and David Gergen, along with Michael Sorrell, who is an alum of Duke and the president of Paul Quinn University. And that's going to be a special celebration of our 50th, where we want to talk about public service and democracy. So I hope you can join us next Thursday for that event. You can find more info about that and everything else about the Sanford School online at sanford.duke.edu. Today, you can also join the conversation on social media. So we want to hear from you. We seek to be a resource for those seeking to make the world a better place. Media and democracy are cornerstones of Sanford's work. Sanford's mission is to improve lives and communities by researching the most pressing problems in the world and educating the next generation of leaders for public service, civic engagement, and leadership. So we're so pleased that you've shown up for our 50th event, and I'll hand it over now to Frank Bruni. Frank, take it away.
Thank you, thank you, Dean. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you especially Linda and Susan for sharing this evening with us and giving us your time. I'm going to chat with Susan and Linda for a while, and then we're going to leave some time for you to ask questions. If you're here in person and you want to ask a question, I think you're supposed to, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're supposed to line up at this microphone, and we will go back and forth between questions from those of you who are here and questions from the hundreds of people online, which will be asked from the back of the room. But first, it's wonderful to be here with the two of you. Thank you again. I have lots of ground I want to cover with you about the history of NPR, about the progress and remaining obstacles for women in journalism. But I thought we'd start just quickly with some current events, because you two are veteran journalists who no doubt have opinions about how the media is performing in these extraordinary, extraordinary times. So I wanted to start with the story of the year, the story of the decade, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the war there. I'm just curious if either of you has any thoughts about ways in which you think the media coverage of this has been very successful, and things that maybe are less successful that concern you about the information and the reporting we're getting. Just at random, can we start with you, Linda?
Sure, I think watching it on television, that's of course a relatively new thing, because we're watching this ongoing war on television and we're seeing grotesque things. I mean, seeing buildings shattered, people dead in the street, horrible, horrible things that are just frightening to look at. And I have no idea. I don't believe that I've ever seen in any other war the United States has been engaged in quite such graphic displays of violence and war as we've seen this past few weeks. Now, I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, it seems to me that it would, and at least the reaction I think that most people would have is that God is ghastly, and therefore they disapprove of that kind of violence. It just comes right from your gut. But I don't know. I think that one of the things we're looking at here is a very confusing situation, which nobody has really yet found a way to talk about. So we've seen a lot of talking about the same things: the desolation, people leaving, people trying to get out of there. I just saw a story yesterday about some people who were trying to get back in. But it's what we do not have is any kind of, we haven't reached a moment where we can have any kind of sense of what is going to happen now, what possibilities exist for talking this thing off the ledge. And I don't know that we will see anything like that. So in one way, I think that the coverage has revealed a tremendous and horrifying look at war. But on the other hand, it has given us a terrible time trying to understand what we're looking at, trying to understand where it goes from here, trying to see if there's any kind of rationale for any of this. So, we got something that we didn't have before, the astonishing graphic display of wartime, and something that we have had always, which is we don't know what the hell is going on.
Frank, what Linda just said reminds me of a friend of mine who had been the photo editor for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and before that he was executive director of Magnum and worked on the Life magazine as well. And there was great discussion in their editorial meetings during Vietnam as to what to do about the photograph of the child running on fire from napalm, running screaming down a dirt road. Became one of the iconic images of the day. My friend, his name was John Morris, was a Quaker, and he fought to put that on the front page above the fold of the New York Times. And the folks in the editorial meeting said, why in the world should we do that? And people will be eating their breakfasts. And this is, we have real standards about what we show and what we do not show. And his answer was, they need to see that war is in fact hell. And this is the most vivid way to make people aware of it. And maybe it will do something. Maybe it will affect our behavior in some way, or take the guns away or something. And that was such an interesting way of thinking. I'm thinking about it particularly now because to me, this is a war that's distinctive just in terms of journalism and coverage in two ways. One, it's a women's war in ways that has not been before. We have, I can't count, I'm not sure how many correspondents we've got over there, it's at least 5, but we've had the female anchors of our 2 major strip programs, Morning Edition and Old Things Considered, spent some time over there. This is unheard of. Linda and I would never have had the chance to do that. I'm not sure how much we would have wanted to do it, but there never would have been that opportunity. And the second thing is the power of images. I don't watch this war on television. I watch it on the pages of the New York Times. And I have an actual, I can't talk about newspapers without doing this. I actually have subscriptions to the Post, Washington Post, as well as the New York Times. And the still photography, the photojournalism that's being published in color, which it could not have been in prior wars, is so powerful. And they're giving over pages, full pages to it. Oh, I'm so sorry. Somebody doesn't like what I'm talking about. Oh, it's my son. Sorry. That the power of it through these instruments and through these publications is extraordinary. John Morris will be looking down from heaven somewhere and having lots and lots of opinions over this. But to me, it makes it so visceral to be able to see at that level and in that density that I would love to hear those descriptions at the editorial meetings in the morning. I imagine rather than saying, oh no, you can't, the conversation would go, where do we get some more, and how do we protect our photographers when they get that close?
I want to stick with you, Susan, just go in the reverse order and ask about one other current event. Within the next few days, maybe the Senate is going to confirm Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. And quite recently, we watched and read about her confirmation hearings. Were those hearings just par for the recent course, or did we descend to some sort of new low in this country with them?
It got pretty low. And I got my information, well, I listened every day we went gavel to gavel throughout the day on NPR. And we, of course, have the most powerful weapon that there is, that is the formidable Nina Totenberg, who is our Supreme Court correspondent, to explain to us what it was that we were listening to. But yes, how she began being attacked on such racial grounds, racial hints, and then not such hints at all, but just absolute blows to it was a new low. Yeah. I don't have much more than that to say. Maybe Linda.
Linda, anything to add?
I beg your pardon?
Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think that it's very difficult to see how the American people could respect some of these members of Congress because of the way they talked and because of the things they said. I mean, obviously they have the right to be as critical as they want to be, but I think that we obviously used to have a much more, I think, not exactly, they weren't nice, but they weren't quite as vicious as they are now. And I don't understand how that happened. I mean, I understand how it happened. I don't understand why the American people put up with it. My first impulse would be not to vote for some of those guys. But then, I think that somebody did vote for them, and there they are. I just have not got over the fact that we have had lots and lots of hearings, lots of confirmations. We've had people up for jobs that they weren't qualified for. We've had stupid people. We've had racists. We've had all kinds of folks that you really would not want to see in any very responsible position. Every once in a while, we get them, but I don't think that any of them got treated the, the way people are being treated now. And I don't think I can't think that it's an improvement.
What is it doing to our country, and how do we pull back from that? Any ideas for us on that? It's something we all think and talk a lot about here at a university, and particularly the School of Public Policy.
That's the eternal question, though. It's a question that's on everybody's mind right now. Every right or left thinking person's mind is, how do we bring us together again? Because permission has been given at the highest level of America not to behave that way. And we're up now much more than we have ever in my memory, up for good fights. That's, if it bleeds, it leads used to be the old term in television, broadcast television news in particular. But now it's everywhere. It's, if it bleeds, it'll get your attention. If it bleeds, we're up for people really being rotten to one another and seeing whether they can get away with it. And we enable that. We help it. We vote for it. We pay for it. We're in a very sad place now. And I don't know, it's a breakdown of a lot of, oh gosh, I sound like such an old crabby person. It's the breakdown of institutions that have stood by us for centuries. The church, the institution of parents being, this is terrible to my feminist friends, and it's certainly not just them, it's the institution of parents, although the pandemic has brought parents back home and able to offer the lessons that we were raised by. But still, it's just a shaky, it's much shakier grounds and much more combative grounds than I can ever remember in this country. And it used to be called, wasn't it called the Gentleman's Arena, something like that, about the Congress? And I mean, go find the gentlemen now, and most of them are getting out.
Well, the only thing really that we, the American people, can do is vote against these folks.
Yeah.
Just simply not, don't stop voting, don't walk away from it, engage as best you can, and vote against people that you feel are, not doing the right thing by the United States. It's very odd the way people have begun to feel that they are taking some sort of vengeance against this country by behaving in this way. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand it. Maybe we need to go back to, I keep saying we need to go back to some of the old myths, like George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, that kind of thing. Maybe we once believed that. Maybe it gave us some kind of standing to, to approach elections. I don't know, but whatever it is that's going on now cannot be good for us.
I agree. You're here.
Are you? We lost our visual. We lost our visual of you, Susan. Are you still there? Oh, there you are. Oh, wait.
Oh, there I'm here.
This is like some media meta experiment. I want to. So you were introduced tonight, and you are often referred to and refer to yourself sometimes as the founding mothers of NPR. And that phrase has such resonance because people are so surprised, sadly surprised, that 50 years ago, you were able as women to find such a central place at a news organization, at what became a news institution. How did that happen? How was it that NPR 50 years ago was creating, affording a place for women that many professions and certainly journalism didn't afford most women at the time?
There are a couple of there are a couple of basic great sort of practical questions that that had to do with that. One is that we did not have to fight against a legion of men who had been hired, 50 years ago and were in charge of everything. And we entered a new what we now call a startup, and that made a big difference. I mean, just as it was an opportunity that we could move in and move up because of the difference in competition. But I think that one of the things that really made a difference was that we had a leader, and he also did not have to spend a lot of time worrying about what we had done before, because there hadn't been any before. And he felt that Americans should listen to a radio program that sounded like other Americans talking. And so he thought, you can't do that without women, because that's, more than half the population. So women get, and it was a practical matter. It worked because women were not as expensive to hire as men with experience were. But I think that there were just a sort of a lot of practical reasons why it happened when it happened. But there were also some sort of philosophical reasons why people who wanted it to happen were in there pushing to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. And it was extreme poverty, really, that drove the engine at the very beginning. And we were lucky, Linda and I, we were both married. And so we were two-income families. And we could afford to take the really sad and pathetic salaries that we were offered, because there was somebody else working and earning money in the house. That was true even amongst the unmarried women. They didn't stay quite as long, although Totenberg came unmarried and eventually did find a spouse. But the men didn't last that long with us, because they had families and children in particular to support. This all happened over time. And then there were a whole lot of better paying opportunities in those days. I guess there still are, but there's also far more. This is an interesting time for many, many reasons for NPR and for journalism and for television too. We're up against so much more competition now, NPR is, as a non-commercial broadcast organization, than we ever were before, because of podcasts and because of the internet and because of social media, so much more that is out there. When we were starting 50 years ago, there were the three major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. There was also PBS, public television, but it was very sort of off on the side somewhere. And those were the big guys, literally. And they were the ones that there was nothing like competition. We couldn't dream of it against them, because they could afford to own helicopters and fly them into war zones. I mean, they were rich, and we certainly were not. So we had at the beginning to think of very interesting alternative ways of getting the job done. And we get a lot of teasing for how we did it at the beginning, because we analyzed everything a day late. we had 5 reporters. On the other hand, we had a special arrangement with the Christian Science Monitor when we went on the air. They were a solid newspaper in the 70s, and they had reporters all over the world. So someone struck a deal to give us access to all of their reporters. And anytime anything was happening in Ouagadougou, you'd make the phone call and put the Christian Science Monitor person from there on the radio. So that was it wasn't the best sounding work that we did, but at least we were doing something. But we couldn't get out there in the field the way we can now. We've got extraordinary foreign coverage, particularly in this war. What we're doing is just, I feel it's outstanding. We're getting down with the people. We're talking to Ukrainians who don't want to leave their country. We're, when we can, talking to Russians who don't want to get in any trouble, so they have to be so terribly careful. I don't know how long that's going to continue, by the way. But at first, you just had to be as clever as you could and be as alternative. Linda started out on the air. She'd had a good experience off air in major broadcast institutions, CBS and the BBC. But she started on the air as a consumer reporter. Nobody had that. Nobody was doing that. But we did, because it was different. You know, it was something that nobody else was doing, and a way in which we could compete and make our mark. But then
We also were very interested in reaching out to women.
Yeah.
And that was another way to do it. I must say that I continue to be just completely amazed by our wartime reporting done by women. You know,
Yeah.
Ann Garrels, for example.
For a long time, decades ago.
Yeah, it started a long time ago. And Deborah Amos. We had women going to war. You know, other people hadn't done it yet. Susan and I both went to work for NPR. This was just to tell you what a long ago and far away time this was. Both Cokie Roberts and I, were interviewed by the same vice president of NBC when we were looking for work after we got out of college. And he said, he basically said, we already have our women.
Nina had that experience too.
Nina had the experience, yes, not with the same guy, but yes, she did. Yeah. Exactly that. We already have our women. And then she was trying to get a job at newspapers at that point.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, we were new, we were coming in. And there was a moment where we were able to get out there in front of the world and do what we always knew we could do, but we had never had the opportunity.
It was also, the timing was so good because it was the time that women were pouring into the workplace, educated women, qualified, and wanting to do more than be at home. For my generation, your big opportunities were to get married, which was very nice, have children, that was very nice too. And that was it. Maybe you could be a teacher, maybe you could be a psychologist, but other than that, there really wasn't much else that was available to you, as Linda.
So when you look,
as time has gone by, and as of today, I think women are running some of the major organizations now, have really top jobs, and the glass ceiling has been pierced.
Well, you know, my mother, I always thought, should have been able to run General Motors because she was so frustrated by not being able to do anything like that she ran me, my sister, my father, the Sunday school, the Campfire Girls. I mean, she was quite incredible, but I would really have appreciated it if she could have gone out and gotten a job.
When you look at women in journalism now versus when you were starting out at NPR 50 years ago, are you surprised by the amount of progress that's been made or by the amount of progress that's still left to go?
I think that the women that we see on television now, for example, have demonstrated that it is possible to be both good and beautiful. I mean, I think that's a nice thing. They work very hard, and I have a lot of respect for the work that they do. There are some folks that I see on some stations, just want to say to them, button your shirt. But I guess I guess they must, surely nobody could actually tell them to unbutton their shirts. I don't know.
No, the ratings would tank.
But it was, but I think it's a whole different world. And I don't think that these women particularly understand what kind of a world we faced. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that I understand what kind of a world they face, except that I think that they do very well. I'm very impressed.
Susan, do you want to add to that?
There's room for big bets behind those anchor desks on television. I see it more and more. It's still around. But it's just that the opportunities, and also I like the diversity that I'm seeing on television now too, in news, in particular in news programs, but also in entertainment programs as well. This is a fascinating time that we're going through. I think we're in a tectonic shake right now in this country. We're kind of looking around and looking at one another in new ways, noticing groups that we haven't looked at before, depending on which group we belong to, understanding other races and other cultures being made to understand them and made to pay attention in ways that we have not done. And I find that very exciting. Sometimes I find it too much a one-note samba. Nonetheless, I think it will strengthen us at a time when we really need that. And maybe, Frank, what you were saying before about all these divisions and the need for some kind of healing, which we desperately have, it may further that in some way. Just the familiarity of being able to see people day after day that we don't know and we are not familiar with, kinds of people, races of people, backgrounds of people, will make a difference. Will further our understanding, I hope.
We consume news so much differently now than we did certainly when you started out, even than 10 years ago. People's ability to curate, whatever kind of information or news they want. How much does this new news ecosystem concern you? And do you have any thoughts about how we respond to it so it doesn't sharpen divisions, as you just referred to, Susan?
Yeah, well, Linda knows how deeply I feel and worry about, and I'm old enough to remember sitting around, literally we did this around the family radio, listening to Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats. They were regular and the country came to a stop for them. And we sat from coast to coast, paying attention to what the president was saying. And it unified the country in a way that doesn't happen now because as you were hinting, there's so much more competition for our attention. And I worry deeply about our loss of community here and how what we're looking for always are only primarily the things that interest us that we want to know, rather than the stuff that we need to know as well, simply to get along in this world, to get through the day, to get through our lives and make it a safer, better world for our grandchildren as well, to get the broader view. And so I lament the breakdown of community. And I think it's many of these instruments that you've just named that is really doing it to us. And how to circumvent that, I don't know. If you're only tuned to the things that you love, that's great. But the only things you want to hear, that's not so great either. You need to open yourself to all the rest that's out there in order to understand what is out there and the dynamic forces that can be driving it and shaping us as a result.
Linda, do you have any thoughts on how we adjust for this and don't let it tear us apart?
Susan, is that who were you?
No, that's for you. That's for you, Linda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I think about all of the things that we used to do together. Like, for example, when I was growing up, you didn't make a telephone call to anybody between 11 and 12 o'clock on a Sunday morning because nobody was home. Everybody was at church. Now, I don't go to church. I haven't been to church in many years. But I do remember the community that existed around Sundays and religion and whatnot. We also don't, I think, spend as much time with our extended families as we used to do. In some ways, I think that the wonderful things that we have that we can watch by way of entertainment and information and so on have moved us away from talking to each other. I have a lot of concern that we're just growing farther and farther apart. and that there won't be anybody to reach out to if we should need to reach out. I have cousins who are living in Texas, who live in a small town outside of Dallas, and they tell me, every time I talk to them, they tell me something about their community, something about their town. A great bit of upset has happened because the Methodist bishop of Dallas has decided to move their minister to another church. This is something Methodists do, as any person who's ever lived in a small town knows. But it was a huge thing, and I was thinking, we used to think about those kinds of things. We used to talk about those kinds of things. We used to examine our small world with the kind of seriousness that we presumably now examine the larger one. It's an interesting thing to think about that and to think whether that was a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
I tend to think it was probably good.
Yeah. I don't know though. We're not, we live in this big metropolis, both of us in Washington, D.C., just a few blocks apart from one another, as a matter of fact. So I'm sure there's some of this that happens in smaller towns and in different places around the country. That sense of pitching in and helping and go help put the roof on the barn, that kind of thing. I think so. It has to. I mean, that's an American way too, by the way, is to get together and work on something together. But I remember when you were covering Congress, you were giving me a tour one day and of the Capitol building, that beautiful building. And you pointed to, you'll remember the painting, I will not, but it was somebody, the great compromiser, who was, will you remember the name? And saying, remember they used to be able to do that. And this was years ago. I mean, they were still doing it. These days, I don't know, but there were leaders in the country, people who spoke out about the need to compromise and the need to make community and to move forward together. Well, Biden talks about that all the time, actually. I guess he's an old-fashioned crabby woman as well.
He certainly is.
I'm glad to see all those young people in the audience.
With backpacks, that's...
Yeah, and there are lots of women, I noticed too, who have come, and that's great.
Where, if anywhere, in the current programming of NPR, in NPR as we consume it these days, where, if anywhere, do we see this growing fracturing, polarization, this frenzied competition for attention reflected? How has NPR had to change?
I'm told that, we're all in lockdown, so we don't get the good gossip that we used to do in the before time. But I'm told Audie Cornish, who had our old jobs on All Things Considered for a while as an anchor, left the company recently to do some television project. But she said on her way out to me, you can't believe the competition that's out there. We're competing now with Sony. That this proliferation of ways of trying to grab attention, grab audiences, is really putting us on our toes. And I can see just from staff memos and all, and sometimes going to staff meetings, how we're working to respond to that. And I noticed that the ideas are coming from the 20-somethings on staff. We've got loads of them. They're very good at computers and also of thinking of new ways based on what interests them. Not just subjects that I was complaining about. Don't just pay attention to the things that interest you, get broader, but just things that ideas and thoughts that can intrigue and make a difference. I think we're all motivated. Those of us who came first certainly were, to make the world a better place, as your dean spoke about as well, about the school there. And I certainly was motivated for that in coming to NPR, feeling it was a place that could work in a unified way in order to make things better, improve the world. And I feel that the young ones who've joined us, and by the way, it's a marvelous thing to do. And if you're thinking about careers in journalism, they're very different from the ones that the three of us were able to enter, luckily. But it's an opportunity. It's a noble cause. It's a noble way to live in this world. And do consider it seriously, because you can make a real difference and a real contribution as well.
I want to pivot
Not
off
to
that.
mention very satisfying work.
I want
Fun
to pivot
and
off that
fun.
before we go to audience questions. So we're here, there are a lot of students here. There are probably more who are watching remotely. What would you say to those students who are intrigued by, potentially interested in journalism? Why should they go into it? And what's the best way they can prepare themselves for the most successful careers in journalism? Why don't you start, Linda?
Why doesn't who start?
Why don't you start,
You.
Linda, please? Linda, you. Linda, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, why don't
I'm
you start?
sorry,
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you at the beginning there. I think one of the things that is that I find very strange is how interested people are in going to work writing podcasts. I mean, it's very interesting to write. It's sometimes, I suppose, it's very similar to writing for a magazine. But one of the things that I worry about with podcasts is what if they're not well edited? One of the things that NPR has always been is very well edited. We've had people who watch us like a hawk, everything that we do. And that, I think, is something that is, it's a hard thing to get used to if you're new to, if you're sort of starting out in journalism. The editing, the care with which people try to see to it that you don't say anything stupid or incorrect as you're headed onto the air. I think I would say my advice to people who want to get into this line of work is just to remember that there's a lot of competition out there for jobs. And so one of the things that I think you have to do is you have to be willing to do whatever it is that you're told to do. If somebody tells you that they want you to go to war, you go to war. If they tell you that you're supposed to go out in the middle of the country and talk to voters about why they voted for Donald Trump or didn't vote for Donald Trump, then you go. You don't. I don't think I ever said no to anything while I was working at NPR. It would never have occurred to me to say no to anything. It occurred to my mother, who I've mentioned before, who had a lot to say about everything. But she said she was terrified to find some of the things that I had done. She would hear the pieces on the air and she'd call me up and and tell me that I should not have done that. I shouldn't have gone there. What was I thinking? I think that I think you have to just throw yourself into it. It's a very exciting thing to be working on. Journalism is a very exciting thing, and I think that you just have to be willing not to be afraid, but just to go ahead.
As far as the preparation, I've always believed that there's nothing like a good, solid liberal arts education. I hope that still pertains because it gives you, again, a sense of the world and the breadth of the world and the elements of it, and helps to shape your worldview. But I wish that I don't really wish it, but I felt the lack of having any history at all at Barnard College. And they made it available, but I never did it, and I never did economics. Good Lord, I would hate to have had to do economics, but I think it wouldn't have hurt. And certainly some good, solid American history and world history. I was doing a lot of contemporary civilization kinds of courses and being taught the canon, starting with Greece and moving across. So that certainly gave me a worldview, but it didn't give me a lot of practical stuff. On the other hand, college is the only place you're going to get that and have the time to look at it with the level of intensity that you have in those 4 or however many years you're staying with it. So I think that is just the most solid education that you can possibly find, is really something very important. It would prepare you for anything and prepare you to raise questions and think for yourself, I hope, and be able to challenge and see where the institutions are failing. But also the journalism is what shines the light in the darkest places. And, you know, Jefferson said, of all the institutions, the one that we couldn't do without, that a democracy would suffer without, is journalism, is reporters looking and examining and holding government to task and reporting when it wasn't doing what it needed to do for its people. Look what Putin's doing now in Russia, shutting down any possible criticism or any possible newspaper or source that is disagreeing with him. There's proof every day for it.
Yeah, thank you for that. We're going to go to audience questions now, if that's okay. So why don't you start us off, and then we'll go to the back of the room for a Zoom question and back and forth.
Thank you, Professor Bruni. Hi, my name is Gus Gress. I'm a first-year student at Duke, considering studying public policy here in Sanford. I'm a big fan of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. Thank you for that. And I recently heard a guest lecturer at Duke. It was this young journalist and writer, and she was saying that sometimes she's tasked with writing stories about things that to her don't seem that interesting or wouldn't seem that interesting to a general audience. And she was saying that part of the challenge of writing about those types of stories is finding ways to make these ordinary things seem interesting. My question to you is, as journalists, when you reach a level of success and you're at a great and high profile place such as NPR, and you get the privilege of writing about stories that do have a very wide audience and a lot of people do want to hear about, what then becomes the challenge with telling those stories?
The challenge about telling a really great story?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes,
Those
that's the question.
stories write themselves. That part's easy. I have the challenge all the time because these days, and for many years now, I've been covering visual arts on the radio. I do it because A, I love them, and B, it's impossible. But with that, it's really rough for a number of reasons. A major reason being very few people are interested in art. I have come to learn over time. So my challenge every time I sit down or go out or sit down to write about it or report it is how to make it interesting. I just want to grab you by the collar, by the lapel, and force you to listen to that radio. And I insist on telling you that story. And that's the toughest part, is to how to entrap you so that you'll stay with me and pay attention to it, because I think it's really important what I'm telling you. And it may just broaden you in some way, and it will let you breathe. It'll give you a breathing place in your day, I hope. It's different from the war, and it's different from so many tragedies. Just to take a look at beautiful painting or incredible sculpture or an installation that some artist has labored over for ages, and you don't begin to understand, but you're intrigued by, so you'll spend some time with it. But that's the challenge. Do you agree with me, Linda, that the great story kind of tells itself? It's a matter of ordering it and structuring it so that it will sing, but it's there.
I spend most of my time covering politics, and there are a lot of people in this world who thinks that is not at all interesting.
Right.
I spent a lot of time covering the Congress and talking about legislation.
Yeah.
Another thing that was not at all interesting.
Yeah.
I think mainly, if you're trying to make people eat their peas, what you have to do is do the best possible job you can to make it as clear and plain as you can, and just tell it. I have always been so interested in politics that I think that helped me a great deal, because I believed it was interesting in the same way that Susan believes that classical music is interesting and that theater is interesting. Lots of people don't pay any attention to either one of those things, but they should.
Yeah, and you find ways.
Do we have a question from online?
Hi, Susan and Linda. Thank you so much for being here. The first question for our virtual audience is for Susan, and it comes from Doreen. She says, I want to be Susan Stamberg when I grow up. Any suggestions? What advice would you both, Susan and Linda, give to people who look up to your careers specifically?
Well, thank you very much. And be careful what you wish for. What can I say? I think that I am who I am because of how I grew up and where I studied. I'm a New Yorker, Manhattan. The West Side before it was called the Upper West Side. I just grew up on the West Side of New York, Manhattan. I had a very good, solid education at Barnard College. And before that, an extraordinary high school in Manhattan. It was then called the High School of Music and Art, a free public school where we had 3 classes, very competitive, 3 classes a day in our major, either music or art, and then a very stern, very strict go to college academic program as well. It was wonderful preparation. And growing up in the city, I mean, that's the best university you could go to is being out and about. I'm sure Frank agrees with this. You're not a New Yorker, are you, Frank?
Sort of, but never mind. Yeah.
Oh, well, sort of is not a real New Yorker, then. I'm sorry. Yeah. But I think that it was such an enrichment of people whom I've met from plenty of other places in the country say, oh, what a shame you had to grow up in New York. And oh, that must have been just awful. Well, New York was very different when I was coming up. I don't think it's awful to this day, but it was so rich with museums and culture and concerts and theater in the days when Arthur Miller and Truman Capote were writing, and jazz in the days when Miles Davis was playing and Louis Armstrong was being discovered, and Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra. I mean, you know, it was just an extraordinary golden time. So that was maybe even a better education than what I got at Barnard. But I was so lucky to have been surrounded by all of that after World War II, which was, it was a very difficult time racially and difficult in the Cold War and terror about the communists, but it was such a time of optimism and possibility. So that was very lucky for me. And if you can recreate that for yourself, then you can be me.
Grace?
Hi, my name's Grace, and I'm a senior here at Duke studying history and journalism. And I was curious, a lot of major news organizations have begun using audio-based formats like podcasts as a way to disseminate the news. And I was wondering what you thought about that transition and its potential growth, and what are some things that an audio format like a podcast can enhance in our news reporting, and is there anything that print can do that audio can't, and a reason we should hold on to that form?
Mm-hmm.
I think that that it's possible that print, because of the among other things, that you can it's write in long format that you can't necessarily write when you're working in audio. You know, people don't really, I think, find it possible to listen to an essay being read on television and on radio, which is 30 minutes long. I mean, it's much worse than a book on tape. A book on tape is much more fun than that. But I think that, as I said, one of my main concerns about podcasts is the editing, whether podcasts are edited or not. But basically, I think podcasts are the child of the essayist that used to be. I mean, I was just watching the PBS program on Ben Franklin last night, and he published in his rather eccentric newsletter, he published essays that were provocative, and that people, they frequently, he didn't name who wrote them. He wrote many of them himself. But I think that's podcasts are just a descendant of that kind of writing. And so I think we've done it. We've liked it. We've benefited from it, and I think we'll benefit from it now. Radio and television have the capacity to be almost theatrical in reporting, and to be theatrical in talking about important issues of the day, and I think that has its place also. I always have felt that if something is really not any good, and nobody will listen to it, and it will go away. So I think you have to assume that if a lot of people are listening to something, that it has merit.
One hopes.
We hope.
I love how the newspapers, I take full credit for radio in connection with how the newspapers are racing to do oral elements now. I think they're taking a tip from our success and what we've been able to do with it. And if you remember, Linda, in the earliest programs, we had 20-minute interviews and 30-minute documentaries and all. And what's happening now is the people who are dealing with the podcast, they are doing the same thing. They're doing 20 long form documentary work now, or just interviews as well, taking the time to do things, because our attention has been so collapsed, our attention spans. And I think there is a longing for a number of things. One, taking the time to tell a story and hear it full. And I guess give our glass and this country a lot of credit for that, because he's lengthened people's attention span by the long stories that he puts on in that program. But it's funny, because it is how we started out, much longer form. We had an hour and a half, 90 minutes to fill, and we really needed to sometimes greatly stretch it. Now everything is much more collapsed. But that's fine. I'm glad to be the model for newspapers as well. They did so much for us in the very beginning, showing up at editorial meetings with 1 million clippings from the New York Times and saying, oh, here's a good one, let's do this. Mutual theft.
So we have time, I'm told, for just 2 more quick lightning round-esque questions. So one from online, and then we'll take yours, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, quick answers, that means.
Sure thing. Audrey asks, trust in the media has deteriorated so terribly over recent years, even in NPR. Do we need the fairness doctrine again? Close extreme channels? What are your thoughts about regaining that trust?
Well, I don't notice at NPR that we've lost that trust. So I certainly notice it with the bifurcation of some of the television channels. Now you've got a liberal channel, you've got a very conservative channel, sometimes maybe you've got an objective one as well. I don't tune to any of them, frankly. If I'm interested in news, I'll look at CNN. But mostly I'm listening to NPR because to me it's impeccable. It's as balanced as it will get. It's a good old-fashioned shoe to the ground journalism. And it's as objective as you can be. Anyway, it's always as fair as you can be. Objectivity is a little tougher to get to sometimes.
What she said.
Last question.
So following that idea of fairness, how much do you think that news has to bend over backwards to have this like image of, oh, we promise we're being fair, look, we have both sides, versus to some extent, at what point do you say, hey, we're calling a spade, and sorry you don't like it, but that's the truth. So how do you sort of balance that? I swear we're fair, but there's only so much that we can say if we're telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think that's such a serious question. I can't tell you how serious I think it is. It seems to me, we've fallen into the horrible trap of always having to have somebody speaking who begins, on the other hand. You know, I remember, I think in Fiddler on the Roof, wasn't it? Tevye said, sometimes there is no other hand. I think often there is no other hand. And I think we would probably benefit by just telling folks that. I think it's probably a pretty good idea. I do not, the other thing that, of course, we have to be very concerned about is fake news.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that, you know, that has arrived on our shores and is a disgusting and frightening new element. But I think that the question of always trying to tell the other side of something that may not have another side is something that we should re-examine.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, everybody, for attending today's lecture. A special thanks to Frank and Susan and Linda. Linda, I think it was you who spoke about podcasts and the importance of editing. But I can't help but think that the best way to watch Linda and Susan is unedited.
Very kind, very nice.
That's
Thank you.
very sweet. Thank you. Everybody needs an editor.
To help us celebrate our birthday, we have a gift of crumble cookies for all in-person guests, and we invite our in-person audience to look under their seats for 2 Duke-themed birthday surprises. If you have the winning tickets, please come up now to the podium and receive your gift from us. There are 2 lucky winners. Give a hand to the winners and 50 years of public policy. Yes, I think it's you, and there's one more person. Yay, let's give them a hand. Thank you once again. Let's give a big round of applause to Frank and Linda and Susan.
Thank you. Happy anniversary, everybody.
We're conducting short interviews with public policy students in the back. You're welcome to come. This is for our 50th anniversary. Very short interviews where we ask you about public policy and being a part of Sanford's public policy community. Each interview will last about 5 minutes.